Dear friends, I'm often asked to give advice for young composers of the next generation. So I thought to make this video, a video in which I will talk about some of the pointers that perhaps can help someone to become a better composer. But before I go into more concrete points, I would say that the single most important wish is that I wish you to have a lot of courage. A lot of courage, because you are not going to have easy life. Composers never do. And courage to remain yourself, courage to stay strong by your inner convictions, your inner voice, to be fearless in the world that constantly changes direction, constantly changes likes, dislikes, what's new, what's old, constantly in the position to critique anything you do. And the sense of passion and fearlessness is the ground on which you can base your life and your artistry. If you don't have courage, you will not succeed in this profession. It will crush you. So if there is one thing that I can suggest or advise or wish for to someone who wants to be a composer, it is this sense of courage and the vision, and to stay true to your voice. And now, some of the more practical things that you can implement. I would suggest, if you haven't watched my video 25 things for serious pianists, I would very much suggest for you to watch it, because all of these things apply to you if you want to be a composer. And I'm not going to repeat them here. So perhaps it's even better to watch this other video before you continue watching this one, because they will form, those 25 things will form the foundation for what I'm going to be talking here. My first point is learn to play piano as best as you can. If you remember, Shostakovich was asking all his students to play piano for him and to play standard repertoire, and in fact he wouldn't hear anything new until he heard a person playing piano. And he was very insistent on piano coming first. And it is important. Piano is the foundation, in a way, the wings that will allow you to fly much easier. It's not that it's impossible to write music if you are not a pianist. Of course it is, and there are many composers who are not pianists. But there is a reason why traditionally pianists were the most productive and most successful. So learn to play piano, not with the aim of being a concert pianist. Now, if you want to be a concert pianist, that's a different story. But as an instrument, as an ability to express your ideas on the spot, express it effortlessly. I would strongly recommend, and this comes from my own experience, in addition to playing piano, to learn to play a string instrument and to learn to play a wind instrument. In my case, I have studied flute for many years. I played it since I was 8, and I was still giving concerts as flutist in the United States in my 20s. So I don't play flute anymore, but I did get to a professional level playing flute. I also studied violin for many years, and the physical knowledge of playing a string instrument and wind instrument is incomparable to anything else you can learn about orchestration. There is nothing else as personal experience. Third point is take voice lessons. It's important to understand, physically understand, what does it take singers to produce sound? When do they breathe? What are the breaking points in their voices? What are the tessituras? And to learn it professionally with the teacher, and to gain this insight, because it's a special art to write for voice. Next point is take conducting lessons. And the goal here is not for you to become a conductor, but to be able to look at the score through conductor's eyes, to be able to analyze it through conductor's eyes, and to be able, if necessary, conduct your rehearsals. Now, if you want to become a conductor, again, it's a different profession, it's a different training, it's a different instrument, so it's a different type of training. But the basics of conducting you need to learn, and to be able to understand the psychology of a conductor and how conductor sees the score, because it's different from composers. Next point is seek every opportunity to perform on stage. Again, this is not so that you become a performer, but it is to gain experience of what works and what doesn't. And again, there is nothing else as hands-on experience to understand what works as for performers, what works for the audience, to be able to learn from those performers you collaborate with. This is invaluable. You can, how can you get performances? For example, you can volunteer. You can volunteer in student orchestra, in non-professional orchestra if you're playing instrument other than piano. You can volunteer into ensembles of new music. They usually search for performers. So if you are in need to find performance opportunities, you will always find them in the school or university environment. Or if you are not in the school environment, then in the non-professional orchestras, which sometimes they are excellent orchestras. And there are many non-professional orchestras in many countries. Listen to music, especially the masterpieces with scores. Try to understand what makes the masterpieces. Try to capture the magic. What is it? Why they work? Listen to the music of the 20th and 21st century with scores. And I put it in a special category because through explorations of the composers of the 20th and 21st century, you can learn a lot about extended techniques and notation. After all, we communicate as composers through music notation. And you need to be able to communicate unorthodox, unusual ideas, sonorities, and know how to notate them, and what works, what doesn't. And even if you are not planning to use them, you still need to be able to do it if you want to. Go to as many rehearsals as you can, especially orchestral rehearsals, and try to sit right behind the conductor so you can actually hear what he or she says. And this is a very important experience to understand how orchestral rehearsals are structured. And believe me, I've seen numerous times when composers they are not even welcomed in the orchestral rehearsals because they don't know how to use time properly. Should you speak to conductor or not? Should you speak to the orchestra directly? Should you perhaps wait until there is an intermission and then talk to conductor? Should you just write down your notes and then maybe email them later? What are the proper procedures? How to use the very limited time that is allowed. There is always not enough time for rehearsals. That's a fact. But it's important that you understand how to structure time and understand conductor's priorities and responsibilities towards wise use of this time. So when you are present there, it's important that you are very helpful and not of hindrance and not using unwisely the time of the rehearsals. And also what should be your expectations, because the expectations for the first rehearsal are not the same as for the second rehearsal or for the dress rehearsal or for the concert. So you need to know a little bit what to expect and what naturally will get better or what actually needs fixing and which are the points that you need to work on. Next point is listen to all kinds of folk music. There is a reason why folk music is immortal. It survived centuries and centuries, survived through oral traditions. It keeps on living. There is something essentially alive, vital in folk music. And try to listen to as much of varied folk music as possible because it's all very different. It depends on the culture, on the country, but what all types of folk music share is this incredible vitality. Learn from it. Next point is ask for feedback from performers. Now you may think that they will volunteer your feedback, but they will not. If you ask specifically, then they will. And it's very important that you learn from them because there are things that you might be writing more idiomatically, for example. And I believe it's very important to write idiomatically, as idiomatic as possible, and make it a priority because it is always possible to find a solution to write music that fits well for the instrument, always, and that doesn't compromise your artistic ideas. So learn to write idiomatically because the performers will thank you and will be grateful. And the way you learn is by asking performers for feedback. So ask if something is uncomfortable. Ask if there is anything they think you could do differently that would result in better sound, or just ask for their honest feedback. Next point is, if you're a student, develop professional friendships with other students because they are the ones that will be champions of your music. You may not realize it, but they are, in their hands, the future of your music lies. And composing is a very lonely profession, so develop friendship with fellow students and develop creative professional friendships that grow into and will sustain you in the future, and people who believe in you, people who love your music, people who will welcome your new piece, people whom you can ask for advice. Next point is festivals. Festivals are excellent place for composers to be. Now you may actually choose to go there as a performer, and probably it's almost better. But it doesn't really matter if you're there as a performer or composer. It's an excellent place to talk to other musicians and to get to know other musicians and to learn of their instruments. For example, you will see, I don't know, a tuba player playing under the tree because there is always not enough practice rooms. So go to him or her, ask to show the instrument, ask why did they fall in love with tuba in the first place, ask to play some favorite excerpts. And that's the best way to learn instrumentation. It's actually this hands-on experience of learning from those who love the instrument, from performers. Also attend master classes, instrumental master classes. Well, of course, composers master classes, obviously, but maybe more importantly, instrumentalists and singers master classes, because again, by observing, you will learn a lot. The next point can be quite interesting, because being a composer, it's almost like there is a wizard, and there are apprentice wizards, magicians. So you can volunteer if you want to really find out what is it like to be a composer. What is the life of a composer like? What do you do every day? How do you go about, I don't know, getting commissions, getting publishers, writing, coming up with idea, developing idea, or working with orchestras and so on. If you really want to learn this, volunteer as an assistant to a successful composer, to a composer whose music you admire. It could be somebody on the faculty, it could be somebody outside of your school, but it's important that it's someone whom you really respect, and you can volunteer as an assistant. You can now this person may not need any assistance, but there is always something that you can offer, whether it's, I don't know, engraving services, or whether it's keeping up with correspondence. There is something that you can probably offer, and organizing database of performances, I don't know, but if you really want to find a way to be someone's assistant, you will, and it's an excellent way to learn directly and learn real life. And it's actually it's been historically, composers often worked as, for example, engravers for another composer, music engravers. So that brings me to the next point: learn music engraving very well. Learn it on the publisher's level, so that will be a very necessary, useful craft for your own music. But again, it also can provide you a professional way to collaborate, to assist other composers. And engraving is an art in itself. It's extremely complicated, and learn it from publishers so that you can function on the level of publishing houses. And it's possible. Identify engravers who work for publishing houses, ask for tutorials, and it will be an extremely helpful skill for you, for your own music as well as for you professionally in general. Now, the next point is volunteer to Orchestral Library. Every school has Orchestral Library, every university, every orchestra. Why is it a good experience? Because what you will see is what musicians write in their parts, the individual parts. And usually the orchestras rent parts from the publisher, use them for performers. For performance, musicians write, for example, string players will write their bowings, woodwind players may write when they take a breath, and so on. Conductor may have certain specific ideas to be implemented. All of it goes in pencil into orchestral parts. Now, usually libraries return the parts to the publishers clean, so all of these marks are being erased. If you work in the library, you can see what musicians write. It's very insightful experience, very practical experience. You can learn a lot about bowings, you can learn a lot about articulation, you can learn about what conductors need or look for in the score, or how they perceive meters and so on. So it's a great insight. The next point is take care of your physical and mental health and develop thick skin. You do need to develop, it's a bit of a contradiction here, because as composers we are extremely sensitive to everything. We are extremely sensitive to the needs of others, to a woodwind player taking a breath, to the nuances, phrasing. So it's extreme sensitivity on one hand, but you have to also develop a very thick skin, because it's a very tough profession. It's the toughest profession in music. So if you don't have what it takes to get through this rough existence, again, it may crush you. So for that you need to be strong. You need to be very strong mentally, you need to be strong physically, and you need to know how to take care of yourself. And this is something that I'm still learning. I used to neglect my health completely, work night and day. Whenever I had a big deadline, I would work literally around the clock, and I majorly wrecked my health. So I'm learning it hard way. Don't do that. Don't sacrifice your sleep. It's not worth it at the end, because if you die, you can't compose music. It's unfortunately that's how it is. So don't kill yourself literally while working on your craft. Learn how to stay healthy, how to take care of yourself physically and mentally. Next point is read. Read a lot. Become very knowledgeable about literature and art, because they might be more influential on your process than music. Sometimes we need a little bit of distance in order to see the form, and this is where visual art and literature come very strongly. So be as knowledgeable as possible about different forms of art. Seek input from professors and students from different countries. If you are in a big university, the chances are you have many international students. Talk to them, learn about their cultures. It's invaluable input, and it can broaden your worldview, it can broaden your perspective, it can give you new ideas. And it's important to be able to step out of your comfort zone, which is my next point, and to step out of your comfort zone musically and as well as a person. Now, it also translates into, as composers, we tend to have certain, call it bag of tricks, certain things that tend to go from piece to piece, certain sonorities or rhythms, whatever it is. And we tend to rely on them because we know they worked once, they worked twice, well, the chances are they're going to work third time. And it becomes our comfort zone, something that we know will work. Now, I strongly advise you, yes, know what works for you. Maybe there is something like a signature style for you, but don't rely on it. Get away from it. Ask yourself, does the piece really needs it? Try to start each piece from zero without relying on your past successes. Each piece has to be a new country, new road, new challenge. Try to push yourself away from your comfort zones, from your bag of tricks, so to say, from that which you know. Explore what you don't know, explore what you fear perhaps, and maybe there you will find something that was hiding from you before. but perhaps will become your true voice. Try to find and to identify contemporary composers whose music you passionately like. It's important not to make idols and not to create gurus and so on, but at the same time identify music that you are passionate about, contemporary music that you are passionate about, because it tells you something about yourself, and it may help you, it may inspire you to go in a certain direction that where your passion lies, because ultimately you have to write music that you yourself passionately like. So do search for music of contemporary composers that you connect to, and let it be your mirror, let it be a reflection of the direction where you want to explore, or perhaps to go against that direction also. If we like something, it doesn't mean that we are going to try to copy it. It may actually mean that maybe it's something that we want to go into completely different direction. But it's important that you are passionate about the process and the process of discovery. Next point, I marked it as 24. Listen to music you don't like and give it a second chance. Now, after giving it a second chance or perhaps third chance, you may still figure out that you don't like it. But don't just discard music on the first hearing, because a lot of the times it takes more than one hearing to connect, to understand, and listening is an active process. So in order to know what you like, what you don't like, you need to know how to listen and to learn how to listen and how to listen proactively. Next point is get very knowledgeable about publishing, about rights, about grant rights. Unfortunately, this is not taught in conservatories and universities, and what composers end up doing is they are literally like puppies in the ocean after they graduate. They don't know a thing about music industry. They don't know at all how it works, how music is commissioned, how pieces get published, what does it mean to be published, what does it mean music rights, what does it mean grant rights. They don't know anything, and unfortunately it's not taught, and it's not taught enough in the schools and conservatories. So it's your responsibility to be knowledgeable about it, because it's your life. Nobody will get knowledgeable for you. Nobody will do it for you. You have to do it yourself. You may not think it's the most creative part, but it's part of your profession. And not all aspects of our profession are about creation. Next point is dream big. Don't limit your imagination. Often we tend to right away think how we are going to accomplish certain idea, and it's important to let idea first to exist before we start being too concerned about first step, second step, and so on, before we get too practical. Being practical may be good in the later stages, but it can kill creativity at its start. And there is something about universe. It likes big ideas. It likes crazy, completely unrealistic, mad, bigger than life ideas. It just does. And when you come up with such an idea, somehow the universe helps you to achieve it. So don't right away go for, oh, let's use small forces. Let's think small. Well, maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe that's what the piece requires, then by all means. But don't limit your imagination from start. Think big. Learn how to be expressive with a single line of music. So you need to be equally comfortable writing for 120 people or writing for a single instrument, single line, and to be most expressive. And great master, great painter can draw with a single line and create a masterpiece. So learn to be very expressive with a single line. The next point I already mentioned, learn how to communicate idiomatically. Now, not all composers had it as a priority. We all know, for example, that music of Schubert is extremely difficult to play because it's not particularly idiomatically written. Some passages of Beethoven can be very, very difficult to play. Now, let's say passages of Liszt can sound very virtuosic and impressive, but in reality they are not difficult. Now, I'm not saying that one is good, the other one is bad, but it's always a great pleasure for performer to play something that is written well with great knowledge of his instrument, and that shows certain appreciation for performers' skills. If you write for wooden instrument, remember they have to breathe, and remember how, for example, attack happens in the beginning of the sound happens in woodwind instruments versus brass versus string instruments. So be as knowledgeable as possible. Then you can make a choice. You should always put artistic goals first, but there is a fine line where when your artistic goals can be accomplished without sacrificing idiomatic writing. So I always suggest learn instruments as well as you can, learn from performers, learn from playing them, and write as idiomatic for the instrument as possible. Collaborate with best musicians and best minds that you can find, because you can learn from them, and that's the best training. Number 29 is respect your work. Learn to say no. Don't do favors. It just doesn't work. Believe me, it doesn't work. If you don't respect your work, nobody will. And the last point is keep music alive. Keep magic of music alive. As I mentioned, it's a tough profession, so it's very important that you keep this childish magic of creating something wondrous from nothing alive throughout the toughest times in your life. What else can I say? Proofread everything, then proofread again, then proofread again, then proofread some more. Proofreading is exceptionally important. I may have another video just for proofreading, because I developed a whole system of proofreading orchestral scores. It saves time in rehearsals, it saves time, and it allows the time to be used wisely, to be used for achieving greatest performance, not wasting time on figuring out things. And always go overboard, always deliver 200% of what you can in order for the performance of your piece to be the best possible one, and the piece to be realized as fully to your dream version of this piece as possible. So this is my my list of things for composers. Something that I would very much also advise is to keep a diary. Every day improvise something short, just a mood of the day. Don't improvise in styles of other composers. That can be counterproductive for your own composition. But do improvise, and keep a composition diary. Write something short every day. Write 1 page, but it has to be a complete thought, complete short piece. You can tell yourself that you will throw it away. But you may or may not. You may use it someday, and it can be incredible creative bank of ideas for your future works. So even though you tell yourself that you will never use it, it can still be a very creative bank of ideas when you're searching for ideas. One point I would like to make is try not to leave too many ideas abandoned completely. Even if you may not think it's a good idea, still try to give it some form, a sketch, something that preserves this idea that it exists in some form, because there are two aspects to it. First of all, every idea puts up certain resistance. It always happens, and one need to be able to work through this resistance. There is a sense of flow with the idea, but there is also, as when we start working on it, there is always sense of resistance. Sometimes the greater resistance is, the greater idea is, and the greater result is. So we need to be able to work towards the idea even when we feel this resistance. And there is also something else. When we abandon too many ideas completely without giving them any form, they start cluttering the soul. There is something about it. It's really Muse likes those that appreciate it. So you may not, if for some reason you started with the idea and then you feel maybe you don't want to continue with that idea, finish it in some way so that you don't have to use it, you don't have to come back to it, but it's somehow complete within itself. You can play through it in some way, you can explain, you can talk through it, but it exists. And put it aside. Maybe one day you will return to it. But don't just abandon it, because with too many abundant ideas, there is this sense of clutter of the soul, and take your muse seriously. If you want her to come back, and you should appreciate her gifts. So yeah, finish your ideas. Try to keep as many ideas realized as possible, and sometimes it takes time. I have pieces that literally took me 25 years to realize, from the conception to realization. There is a piece actually that I had a concept when I was 13, and that I only realized a couple of years ago. It took me my whole life, and yet I still felt I needed to return to. Now, it doesn't mean that you should be greedy with your ideas. You should be able to cut your material, cut your darlings, work with form, but at the same time, yes, don't just abandon them. Give them chance. And I think I will. I'm sure there are a lot of points that I didn't mention, but I feel that this is just a little bit on the surface to give some of you perhaps direction in which to work, and pretty much every single point I could make an entire video just based on every point that I mentioned here and to go into detail. But perhaps it is still helpful and can give you a little bit of inspiration to a little bit of direction in which you can continue to grow and develop and follow your inner voice, your inner calling, your inner passion, and keep this passion alive.